On this Sunday night, allegations of crimes against humanity.
They were clearly civilians and they were executed.
The world reacts to shocking images of what Ukrainian officials call a massacre. Canada's sixth wave.
We are seeing hospitalizations rising.
A warning we should prepare for a major spike in COVID infections. Printed sperm, the Canadian breakthrough in male fertility research. And the long struggle of the Star Wars kid.
Within about 2 weeks, was on the cover of the New York Times.
A new documentary about the viral video that brought fame and shame.
Global National. Reporting tonight, Chris Galis.
Good evening and thanks very much for joining us. We begin tonight with a warning that some of the images you're about to see in our coverage of Ukraine are disturbing. World leaders say it's evidence of war crimes and crimes against humanity. Civilians found bound and executed. Ukraine's foreign affairs minister calls it a deliberate massacre. Russians trying to, quote, eliminate as many Ukrainians as they can. The horrific scene is drawing worldwide condemnation.
It is a brutality against civilians we haven't seen in Europe for decades, and it's horrific, and it's absolutely unacceptable that civilians are targeted and killed.
The shocking images are being shared as Russian forces retreat from regions around Ukraine's capital, refocusing assaults on eastern and southern Ukraine. Abigail Bimman has our top story tonight.
More shocking images emerge of civilians slain in the streets of regions around the capital recaptured by Ukraine. Ukraine's head prosecutor said 410 bodies were found in towns near Kyiv.
People with their hands and with their legs tied up and with shots, with bullet holes at the back of their heads. So they were clearly civilians and they were executed.
Russia is worse than ISIS in the scale and the ruthlessness of the crimes committed.
Swift international condemnation. Canada's Prime Minister and the Foreign Minister, who is about to leave for Europe, tweeted about the senseless murder of innocent civilians, saying Canada will support investigations into war crimes to bring those responsible to justice.
Unfortunately, we should expect that this is going to be the first of many horrible revelations.
Russia's defense ministry denied killing civilians Sunday, calling the footage a staged performance by Ukraine. Russia is taking responsibility for these missile strikes in Odessa, destroying an oil refinery and fuel storage facilities. Its retreat from Kyiv is seen more as a repositioning, strengthening their presence in the south and east. That includes the besieged port city of Mariupol, cut off from food and electricity for weeks and key to a land bridge between Crimea and Russia.
They're just holding out by the skin of their teeth, and this is an area that Russia is slowly advancing on and using medieval-type siege warfare. And so the Ukrainian forces definitely need reinforcement there.
And contested areas of the Donbass, which Russia wants to take entirely.
Until the Russians play out that scenario, see what is possible to achieve in the Donbass, I'm not sure that we should feel confident that the Russians are in a place where they are going to engage in good faith in the negotiations.
Russia's chief negotiator said peace talks are set to resume Monday, but also that things have not progressed far enough for any top-level meetings between Russian President Vladimir Putin and Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky, contrary to what Ukraine's negotiator said Saturday. Abigail Bimman, Global News, Ottawa.
As Ukraine reclaims the region around Kyiv, American leaders are calling it a devastating setback for Russia, but the Biden administration warns Russian forces might simply be regrouping. The U.S. is pledging more firepower for Ukraine, which includes getting Soviet-made tanks into the country. Jennifer Johnson reports.
As Ukrainian forces stop Russia's military from penetrating Kyiv, President Volodymyr Zelensky is asking Western allies again for more anti-missile systems. The Biden administration isn't giving specifics, but says it's committed to providing Ukraine with more firepower.
The military future of this attack has to be pushed back, and that's why we are doing so much to back President Zelensky and his military with the tools they need, with the weapons they need.
Zelensky's request last week for more tanks is being granted. The U.S. is working with allies in the region to transfer Soviet-made tanks into Ukraine. The first time in the war, America has helped transfer this type of equipment. The tanks will help Ukraine launch long-range artillery strikes on Russian targets. Some Republicans are criticizing President Joe Biden for not acting faster.
We should give them what they need as quickly as they need it. I think, frankly, what the president's done has generally been the right thing, but about 2 or 3 weeks slower than it should have been.
Trying to turn up the heat on Russia's financial pain, the White House is still encouraging allies to stop buying Russian oil. Lithuania has now cut itself off entirely from Russian gas imports, the first of the European Union's 27 nations to do that.
We're working every single day with partners and allies around the world to make sure that we're tightening the sanctions, closing any loopholes, adding new ones.
The White House also says it would consider giving President Zelensky the power to offer lifting some of the sanctions against Russia if the Kremlin comes to the negotiating table and agrees to finally end this war. Jennifer Johnson, Global News, Washington.
Russia and Ukraine are trading accusations over drifting mines in the Black Sea. Teams from several countries are attempting to defuse explosives left in the open water. Russia says mines have drifted out to sea from Ukrainian ports, but British military intelligence says the mines are almost certainly due to Russian naval activity, calling it a serious risk to maritime activity. The war in Ukraine is overshadowing an important election in neighboring Hungary today. Prime Minister Viktor Orban is seeking a fourth consecutive term. Early results show a strong lead for the pro-Putin nationalist. Orban is already claiming victory. He's up against a diverse Western-looking coalition. Hungary's 6 main opposition parties put aside their ideological differences to form a united front. Frustration is growing in China's largest city, Shanghai, where residents are living under a sweeping COVID-19 lockdown. Cases are rising here in Canada as well, but as Heather Yorick's West shows us, the 6th wave here isn't likely to see broad public health restrictions reimposed.
There's no official information about any plans, any arrangements. We don't know when we're going to leave.
Jane Palabutko is under lockdown in Shanghai. After the Ukrainian tested positive for COVID-19, she was taken to this quarantine center at the Shanghai Expo. Here, there are about 15,000 beds, but across the city, millions are also isolating at home.
There are no showers here, and we're not allowed to receive any parcels from the outside world.
2 years ago, the world watched China impose lockdowns with bated breath, anxious to see if the country would be able to contain this new coronavirus. But Dr. Isaac Bogoch says things are much different today.
We're not really concerned about importing more virus. We already have enough of it here, and we're really in a very different stage of the pandemic than they are.
Thanks to widespread uptake of mainly mRNA vaccines. Still, cases of COVID are up once again in many parts of the country, suggesting that Canada has now entered a 6th wave.
We really cannot say what our new case numbers are. We are seeing hospitalizations rising 4% in the last week.
Fueled by the BA2 Omicron subvariant, experts expect this wave will bring more hospitalizations and, sadly, more deaths. But it isn't expected to overwhelm health systems as much as previous waves. And for now, no Canadian jurisdictions are even hinting widespread public health measures could be reimposed.
We're keeping a sharp eye on it. I always recommend people to be cautious.
Getting boosters, masking, and staying home when sick. Compared to a city in lockdown, a relatively small price to pay. Heather Yorick's West, Global News, Calgary.
Canada's overdose crisis continues to get worse during the pandemic, with many communities reporting record numbers of opioid-related deaths and hospitalizations. In Alberta, another crushing wave of opioid deaths, and experts bracing for another difficult year. Morgan Black reports.
Alberta hit a grim milestone in 2021, the deadliest year on record for drug poisonings. The newest data doesn't bring much confidence to this researcher.
It's really not looking like 2022 is going to be a better year.
On Friday, the government of Alberta released drug poisoning data for the month of January. 160 Albertans died of a poisoning, nearly all related to opioids. Though it's a lower number than in recent months, Dr. Rebecca Haynes-Saw says affected families are still at a loss.
I know people on the ground, people who are advocating and caring for people using substances have been begging for policymakers to listen.
The province says the numbers show Alberta continues to see the long-term impact that the pandemic and related restrictions are having on people who use substances. It points to resources like its overdose response app and treatment programs. Edmonton City Councillor Michael Jans wants to see a new approach explored.
The system's completely broken and people are dying.
In January, he requested a report from the city administration to explore decriminalization. He says the findings supported the move.
We don't decide as city council, it's up to the federal government, but we can ask. We can ask for more tools and we can ask for more options. Decriminalization is one of them.
Advocates are also asking for changes at the provincial level when it comes to drug use. On Friday, a new change at supervised consumption sites began, asking people for their ID before entry. The province says the change will connect clients better to healthcare. Critics aren't convinced.
I don't think we can guarantee that it won't be a major deterrent.
Haynes-Saw says the deaths within the data aren't getting easier to handle.
I get really emotional. It's not something I'm immune to yet. It does bring tears to my eyes.
She hopes change comes soon. Morgan Black, Global News.
In California, at least 6 people are dead and 12 others recovering after a mass shooting in downtown Sacramento. It happened around 2 o'clock in the morning. Police say they were patrolling the area when they heard gunfire and rushed to the scene just steps away from Sacramento City Hall, an area that's packed with bars and restaurants. Video posted to social media shows people running through the street, the sound of rapid gunfire, and ambulances appearing on scene.
How many unending tragedies does it take before we begin to cure the sickness in this country?
I'm heartbroken. And I'm outraged. I'm outraged. Our community deserves better than this.
Investigators still don't know if it was one or more suspects involved. Police are calling for anyone with video recordings on their phones to come forward. Coming up, Canadian cities facing millions of dollars in back pay. Find out they might get some relief from Ottawa. Taxpayers are on the hook for millions of dollars in back pay for RCMP officers. The Canadian government and the National Police Federation Union ratified their first ever collective agreement last year. It includes pay hikes that go back to 2017, and municipalities are expected to foot that bill. But as Catherine Urquhart explains, Ottawa is hinting it might step in to help.
Members of the RCMP ratified their first collective agreement last year. Now, local and provincial governments are receiving bills in the millions to cover retroactive pay.
There's going to be a retroactive payment of about $9 to $10 million, and that goes back to 2017.
Richmond, BC's mayor says the city set aside funds, but not enough, noting that retro payments and annual pay raises will have a significant impact.
This is a big hit on our budget at a time when we can ill afford it, and so we're looking for some compensation and some help going forward.
BC's 2020 Police Resources Report shows there are 65 municipal services with more than 4,000 members. Provincial services have another 2,600 members, so retro pay is owed to an estimated 6,600 members. Surrey, home to Canada's largest municipal RCMP force, will foot the largest bill, estimated at a staggering $46.62 million. The city says it did not have a role in negotiating the agreement, and the federal government does not take into account a city's ability to pay.
Hi, Minister Medicino.
In Ottawa Wednesday, Global News asked Canada's Minister of Public Safety, Will the federal government help municipalities?
The short answer is yes. We're working very closely with municipalities as well as with provincial governments who contract the RCMP as the police of jurisdiction.
No details were provided. In response, the Union of BC Municipalities told Global News the minister does not appear to be saying anything new or substantive. And there was this from BC's public safety minister.
Local government has been working on this issue. They have known that these costs have been coming for a number of years.
Retroactive pay is owed to approximately 20,000 Mounties nationally. Whether that money is delivered by local government or the feds, ultimately it will come from taxpayers. Catherine Urquhart, Global News, Vancouver.
Just ahead, Canadian researchers print up a breakthrough in male infertility. In Canada, about 1 in 6 couples struggle with infertility. 30% of the time, the inability to conceive is related to the male partner. And often it's not treatable. But thanks to a team of Canadian researchers and clever use of a 3D printer, some of those men are a step closer to conceiving. Jamie Maracher shows us how it works.
Inside this Vancouver lab, the printers aren't for paper. Instead, they're being used in hopes of producing something unexpected: sperm.
We wanted to really replicate what we see within the natural human body and try to create these tubules that are about the same size as what we see in the actual testicle. So that gives us a pretty good buffer in terms
In a world first, Dr. Ryan Flanagan and his team at the University of British Columbia 3D printed viable testicular cells. Using stem cells they obtained from a testicular biopsy from a 31-year-old patient with non-obstructive azoospermia, or NOA, where no sperm is found in the ejaculate, the team cultured the cells. When those continued to show a positive viability rate, they were 3D printed onto a petri dish into a hollow tube-like structure resembling the sperm-producing tubules found inside the testicles. 12 days later, the cells had not only survived, but thrived.
We got partway to creating a full sperm, so we arrived at a middle stage of that sperm production process.
For men diagnosed with NOA, the current option is surgery, which can be invasive and ineffective. Global experts say this study is a game changer.
When you take that hope away from patients where they can't have kids and tell them that there is no option, and then you bring forward an option such as what Dr. Flanagan is proposing, that could make a huge difference in the world of infertility.
Flanagan is motivated by the patients he hasn't been able to help. He says his team will now try to coach the printed cells to produce sperm, facilitating cell-to-cell interaction.
This is really the starting point for our research,
with the end goal of giving more men the opportunity to become biological fathers. Jamie Maracher, Global News, Toronto.
Coming up, the story of the Star Wars kid takes a dramatic turn. The entertainment world is looking back at the life and legacy of New York actress Estelle Harris, who has died of natural causes. Most famous for her namesake role playing Estelle, George Costanza's mom on Seinfeld. Harris began her career quite late, at the age of 50. She also played Mrs. Potato Head in Pixar's Toy Story franchise. And those who worked with Harris say she had one of the best voices and best laughs of anyone in the business. Estelle Harris was 93 years old. Well, if you were to write a book on the history of the internet, the chapter on viral videos would have to include the story of a Quebec teen. 19 years ago, before social media or YouTube, a video of Ghislain Reza exploded online, and he became known as the Star Wars Kid. Reza has rarely spoken about what happened, but he's breaking his silence in a new National Film Board documentary. Mike Armstrong reports.
It has somewhere in the neighborhood of 1 billion views, a number that's still growing. But it was in those first days after shooting this video, something no one was ever supposed to see, that things exploded.
Within about 2 weeks, it was on the cover of the New York Times.
Ghislain Raza was only 15 years old when classmates found a video cassette he'd shot at school. They uploaded his video to the web and it snowballed. People added sounds and effects, and it kept growing. When producers from Leno and Letterman, and admittedly this journalist, reached out, he and his parents turned down every interview request. The fear was that people weren't laughing with him, but at him.
At that time, when you have a 15-year-old going through this, I'm not convinced more attention was the right remedy.
But the #1 viral video on the internet is the so-called Star Wars kid.
Now, 19 years later, Raza's part of a documentary shining light on a story he never before wanted told. It's not just a look at what happened, but also what it meant. He revisits the trauma, how he had to leave school, and how the media attention forced his family to move out of their home.
I'm just like...
But he also meets one of the people who originally spread the video. American blogger Andy Bea was 25 years old when he saw it, linked to it, and named it the Star Wars Kid.
I have an enormous regret posting the video. I haven't talked to anybody about this. This is the first time, and I'm just profoundly sorry.
Now, that's something Raza never heard from his former classmates, an apology. His family sued the students and settled out of court. He's moved on, he studied law and rebuilt his life. He's never seen the other students again. Now, one sad irony in this story is how his image was used and spread despite being a minor. The law would have protected him better, he says, if instead of making a video, he'd committed a crime. Mike Armstrong, Global News, Montreal.
And that is Global National for this Sunday. I'm Chris Galis. And tonight we want to leave you with children leading a fundraising effort for the Ukrainian Red Cross. 11-year-old Carl and his friend 10-year-old Rowan from 100 Mile House, BC launched a peace walk over spring break with a modest $200 goal. Well, guess what? They just hit $10,000. Way to go, kids. Thanks very much for watching. Donna Friesen is back tomorrow night. Hope you have a great night.